Hey, this is Joe from Recroom, here to talk to you a little bit about the Recroom art style. A lot of people ask about the Recroom art style. We'll talk about it, wonder, is this in style? Is that in style? So the first thing I want to ask is, what is an art style? And provide my answer for that. An art style in any game is a stylistic overlay. It's like the glasses that we look at the world through. And all of our assets that we make for the game get filtered through that lens. It helps us make choices about color, composition, complexity, and it also helps nudge us in a direction that helps us meet the technical requirements that we have on different platforms. So there's a lot of reasons that an art style exists in a game. But what is the Recroom art style? All of the shapes of everything that exists in Recroom are based off of the almighty squircle. It's the basic atomic unit of everything that's in the game. So I want to take a minute and just talk about the squircle. What is it? It's basically a blend between a square, a circle, or a cube and a sphere, and it has sharp edges. So essentially, if there would be something in our game that would be spherical, we make it a little bit more boxy. Something that would be boxy, we make it a little bit rounder. The great thing about the squircle is it can work on any resolution, but there's a point where you lose the return on having that higher polygon count, and it hurts the lower end platforms. So the area that we like to stay in is more around here. If we need to, we can take away some detail, or we can add a little bit more resolution if we haven't, but this keeps us performant on all the different platforms. Now, another feature of the squircle is that we have the silhouette and then this thing that I call the inner crease. And we very purposefully design with these two things in mind. If you want something to feel more rounded, it's not just about the silhouette, it's also about the distance between the inner crease and the outer crease that sells something as more boxy or more rounded. If we look at something like a simple cylinder, this top one is not how we would make it in Recroom. What we are looking for is that squircle shape. But that's not quite enough because it also doesn't have that silhouette versus the inner crease that we get when we can see the bevel. And so if you look at our avatar items, you can start to see that, right? Buttons, the sheriff's badge, and even if you look at the cloth on the shirt, it has that bevel that you can see from all angles. Things like cloth folds, because the squircle gives us these bold, sharp creases, we extrapolate that into clothing by most of the time we will model in those simplified creases. And it really helps because it reads from a very far distance as a nice graphic look. So when we're talking about a lot of this, a word that comes up in design is construction. So what are the simple shapes that your design is made of? When it came time to create the full body avatar and apply our art principles to it, something we had to solve for was we had never had these connection points between the head, the torso, the hands. So we had to come up with some rules of how to achieve it. So I want to take you through a little bit of the journey from being to full body. How did we apply our principles to come up with something that we enjoyed? Here is a look at the very first work in progress on how we might attach the body together. And what was great about this is that it started a discussion on our principles, on our art style, and how we could bring this into something that we really wanted to look at. And we noticed that there were things like transitions, how one element attached into another, that was causing our eye to look at places that we weren't wanting the viewer to look. And even with things like if you look at the leg over here, we had some simple kind of anatomy, but it didn't feel as intentional. We were lacking the rhythm and flow. So rhythm being you have a curve, and then you have kind of an offset curve on the other side, and this kind of staggering of curves helps lead our eye from one to the next, all the way through a design. And so that's a really good design language. Another principle that we love in terms of design is straights versus curves. And the concept there is whether it's a pose or part of the anatomy. If you have a nice straight line, you get structure and strength. And if you have a curved line, you can have rhythm. And if you put these two together, alternating back and forth, you can get this really dynamic, simplified shape. And here's how we applied straights versus curves to the full body avatar. All right, and you can see that it simplifies things. It gives us a framework for thinking about how we make shapes and keeps it simplified and structured. And now let's bring it back to the concept of silhouette and inner crease. Here you can see that the neck just abruptly joins the head. And so we knew we had to solve for that. And by thinking about smoothing out the silhouette and the inner crease, we're going to keep it so that our eye doesn't get stuck in spots throughout the design that we don't want them to. So instead, by aligning those creases, we get this really nice flow to the transition. And we applied that elsewhere. Here's an example of the neck. The line of any form kind of leads our eye to the next place. And you can see on the right here, we're intentionally trying to lead the viewer's eye up to the eyes of the avatar, because that's where we want to be looking. All right, so here's an example of filtering something through our stylistic lens. Any subject matter, any type of content can be represented in the Rec Room art style. And hopefully now, as you look at this, you can see some of those things that I've pointed out up to this point. Next, let's talk about how we texture and shade our avatar items. There's a very specific set of stylistic overlays that we apply on top of just the color that an item has. We think about how light is occluded. A big one is edge wear. And as you'll see in a moment, that really just helps pop the sharp creases and make them feel very intentional. There's another couple of overlays that we apply that a lot of video games will work with. We apply a very low opacity version of faked lighting into the textures and a vertical gradient. So let's look at that a little bit closer. Here's the edge wear, for instance, and it's subtle. We don't want it to be the first thing that jumps out at you, but you can see as that comes on and off, that when it's there, it makes those sharp edges feel intentional. A gradient, a lot of the reason that you use a gradient is that our eyes will look towards the brightest value, and you can slightly see that it lifts your eye up when that lighter gradient gets overlaid. And then these are basically the types of maps that we output in our specular PBR workflow. So hopefully when you look at this asset, there's some things that you notice about bevels and sharps and textures that maybe you hadn't thought of before. Another thing that we think about is all the platforms that we are on. Here is a UGC avatar item work in progress. If you put a whole bunch of details into your texture, like you see over here, that may get lost as it gets down-resed for mobile devices and mobile VR platforms. So what we do in our textures is we always try to make details as large as they can and as simple as they can be, so that as many platforms as possible really get to enjoy them looking their best. All right, so we've looked at some things about the models and the textures. One element that we can't skip when we talk about the Rec Room style, especially for avatars, is what we call our face sprites, the facial expressions on our avatars. What those were inspired by is some of the art that's great like this, where you have just simple kind of marker drawings that sketch out the expression. And we found that to be really expressive and a nice simplification. And so we picture it as though the faces have almost a low frame rate marker hand-drawn animation on them, bringing them to life. I love this art from Showdown. One of the things, though, that I noticed when I look at this is that the avatar's faces are only so unique. So one thing we've been working on lately is to apply all the things that I've talked about here and to expand the number of expressions and styles that we have to represent on the avatars. And it's really cool to see what people are doing with it now. So that's all of this coming together: squircles, rhythm, straights versus curves, nice sharp edges, marker drawn, animated facial expressions. That's really what makes Rec Room its own coherent style. And all this coming together is the look that is over, this fun place to come together and socialize, hang out, play games, and create. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in game.